every person that I've ever worked with who struggles to have, the confidence in themselves or the trust or the mental toughness, it's because of their past. They have a track record of letting themselves off the hook or quitting or not doing what they're supposed to do. And we have to disrupt that pattern. We have to find out why that pattern is happening. How do we disrupt it? And how do we create a new pattern and start living as the person that we want to be, which is a person who, does what they're supposed to do regardless of how they feel.
Today, I'm joined by Ryan Munsey, the host of the Better Human podcast and author of Fuck Your Feelings. As a world-renowned speaker, we can sway here, and consultant, Ryan works with some of the world's highest achievers to unlock their potential. So I'm excited to dive deep into mastering your mind, achieving success, and becoming a better human being. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Max, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you, man.
I told you before, I'm so excited because for our listeners, the Better Human podcast, just an absolutely amazing show. I've been following you for quite a while now, and really, there's just some really amazing guests on the show. So there's a lot of, direction I want to take this today. But where I want to start is SEAL for training, the last day of training in 2012. That moment when, your coach was drawing that line in the sand, because I think it really exemplifies your work and what you stand for and what you really help people achieve in their lives. So can you take us back to a moment and explain, the power of the mind?
Yeah. So, the moment that you're referring to, as you said, it was the very end of this crucible event. And, the thing I always tell people when they ask about SEAL Fit is, anybody can make you tired. And this is a very special event where it's not just wear you down, break you down. It was, yes, wear you down and break you down physically, but then there would be rest and there would be a lesson. And, there's all sorts of value and lessons that 8, 10, 12 years later, stay with all of us and, permeate every aspect of life. And, for that reason, it was a really incredible experience. And, I believe, let's see, I think we had about an hour left, and we didn't know that we had an hour left. We just.
So they didn't tell you, like.
No, we had no idea. Like, they just said, be here at 6 a.m. and be ready to go. We didn't know how long this thing was going to go or what was going to happen. It was funny. I think it was like, so we started at 6 a.m. and I think it was somewhere around like 9 or 10, somewhere mid-morning. We'd been going for a couple of hours, and one of the guys in our group was like, man, I've got to go to the bathroom. He's like, raising his hand. He's like, Coach, can we take a bathroom break? He was like, yeah, but like, we just thought you guys were going to pee in your pants the whole time. Because like, that's what we do. And I'm like, oh, so they gave us one formal bathroom break. And then the rest of the day, we just peed in our pants. And by the afternoon, like that was a welcome 30-second break from being freezing cold. It was, as I wrote in the book, it was a 70-degree day. It was beautiful. There were people on the beach laying in the sun. And, by the afternoon, we were just teeth chattering, shivering. It is literally the coldest I've ever been. I have been in frozen ponds in Finland. I love ice exposure, like cold water. Like, I mean, yes. I do all kinds of things to intentionally subject myself to, cold and extremes. And this was the coldest I've ever been. I've never involuntarily trembled and shook and had my teeth chattering like that. And, your body is just convulsing. And that's the point of this event is to teach you that your body will quit way before your mind will. And, if you can go to that place in your mind and tell yourself to keep going, keep showing up, keep doing what you're supposed to do, whether it's, one foot in front of the other on the beach or, one cold call after another, if you're in sales, whatever the thing is. And so, we were getting ready to do our last evolution. And that's what they call these, events and lessons. And there were 7 of us, and 2 guys were just so broken down physically that our coaches said, you guys are going to stop. You're going to sit this one out. Wow. And then for the rest of us, they're saying, okay, you 5, come over here. We're going to do this. You got to go grab a big rock. And, the other 4 guys are kind of starting off to go grab rock, and I'm just standing there, and I've got this, like, I imagine I must have had this glazed over look in my eyes. And, Coach McLeod just looks at me and he's like, "Are you in?" He's like, "You can stay and dig a hole with these guys." And I didn't even say anything. I just kind of looked at him, and I just remember him. He's like, he just took the heel of his boot and he drew a line in the sand, and he's like, "Are you in or are you out?" He's like, "You don't have to do it." And it's just the way he said, "You don't have to do it." I was like, "Oh man, he's putting that choice on me," because I was waiting on him to be like,
Yeah.
"It's okay."
To pull you out, yeah.
Yeah. I like, there was a part of me that really wanted him to just be like, "It's okay. You can dig a hole and you don't have to do this." But he wouldn't do that. And he was like, he put that choice on me. And in that moment, I was like, man, I can't choose to quit. I don't have that in me. And that, to me, like, I mean, that's the most powerful thing that maybe I've taken from that, is that, realizing that I don't have that quit button. And, I'm not going to quit. And I know if I can go through that and not quit, there's so many other things in life that are uncomfortable that will be over sooner than, that next evolution was. I mean, it was like an hour of, whatever else we did. And trust me, the whole hour, I was like, man, I wish I hadn't walked across that line. But from that day forward, it's like, oh, I've got to sit down and write, or, oh, I've got to sit down and do this call. Like, all the things that we do in our daily life that seem tough, we're really fortunate that we have the opportunity to do those things. And I think it's a great lesson in perspective. It's a great lesson in, just being grateful and appreciative for what we have and the opportunities, and just a reminder that, our minds are so much stronger than our bodies, and can go so much longer.
Yeah, there's such a beautiful insight that you can really go so much further than you ever thought possible, right? That you can push your body and your mind to these extreme levels where you're just in total pain, right? But even when you get that intentional choice then of, I can't quit, you're not going to. And I think that is really the key, right? Whether you're, an athlete, whether you're a student, whether you're, working in sales, it doesn't matter what you do in your life, but like the ability to delay immediate gratification and really go off those dreams and never take that quit button, right? Never actually press that, is so powerful. And so the beautiful thing is you can actually develop that, right? You can master your mind to the point that you actually get better at this. So walk us through that process. Like, what do people need to do in order to get to that kind of mindset?
Yeah, I think, it's understanding that, had I quit then, every other time the rest of my life, it would have been easier to quit, right?
Yeah.
If we let ourselves off the hook, if we take the easy way out once, then we're more likely to do it again and again and again, or in other instances, right? And yeah, I love the old, maybe it's Buddhist or Zen, but there's a saying that says, how you do anything is how you do everything. And, just developing that grit, that determination, the mental toughness, whatever you want to call it, to, and maybe it's not even, I always struggle because I think for each person, it's a slightly different delivery of the same message that resonates and gets them to click with it. So, in an instance like this where, I'm trying to give a general approach, it's always tough, but, so maybe it's a mental toughness thing. Maybe it's, a decision on who you are. And that's why I always talk about defining your values, and, be someone that doesn't quit, or someone that won't let yourself off the hook. And, if that is a value of yours, if that's important to you, to be somebody who can be counted on and trusted by the people that you love and the people that are in your life and are important to you, if you want to be able to show up for them at all times, most of the time when they need you most, it's when, things are uncomfortable or bad, right? And so, every time we have these opportunities, and this is why I mentioned, like, I love cold exposure. I love things that seem uncomfortable. And, when we can force ourselves into those situations, we're just teaching ourselves that we can show up and we can do these things. And so, looking for all these little examples, like, oh, I could return that email tomorrow, or, here's an awkward or a difficult conversation that, I could put that off. It doesn't have to, I don't have to have that conversation with this person. or, you know, from a diet or a training standpoint, you know, I could skip my workout, or I could stop 2 reps early, or, you know, I could stop if you're doing intervals and it's, you know, 20 seconds of work. Do you work till the buzzer, or do you stop when there's 2 seconds left? Or when it says, when the buzzer goes off and it says start, do you start immediately, or do you like bend down and tie your shoe to buy a little bit extra time? Like, all of those things are just, they're little character tests. Littering is another one, or, you know, it's really easy to litter. Sometimes you have to hold on to a piece of trash until you find a trash can, or, you know, do you return your shopping cart at the grocery store? All these little things like that reveals to us who we are, and it's how we approach these little things and how we go about those little, you know, those micro decisions on a daily basis that add up. And if we can prove to ourselves that we are a trustworthy person, right? That's, so many people come to me and they say, I want to build more confidence. I want to have more confidence. And really, confidence is our ability to trust ourselves. Can you trust yourself to
Yes.
show up and do what you said you were going to do? Can you follow through on the promises that you made? And all those little like examples that I just laid out are ways that we can, you know, build trust in ourselves, build confidence in ourselves, build trust in other people, because, you know, we're making promises to them and we're showing up and we're delivering. You know, and really, I think, you know, every person that I've ever worked with who struggles to have, you know, the confidence in themselves, or the trust, or the mental toughness, you know, it's because of their past. You know, they have a track record of letting themselves off the hook, or quitting, or not doing what they're supposed to do. And we have to disrupt that pattern. We have to find out why that pattern is happening. How do we disrupt it? You know, and how do we create a new pattern and start living as the person that we want to be, which is a person who, you know, does what they're supposed to do regardless of how they feel, and hence the title of the book.
Yeah, you know, I absolutely love that. There's so many nuggets of wisdom that you sort of spread in here. So first of all, I think this act of deliberately living from your standards and your values and who you want to be rather than how you feel in the moment is so powerful, because I found that when you do those hard things, right? And I'm the same way. I love, you know, cold showering. I love jumping in ice cold Rhine that's flowing right through my city here. Is like, it's the most beautiful thing, right? You're freezing in there, right? People like taking pictures of you like this crazy dude. But it's amazing, and you come out and you feel you're freezing, but you're alive, and it makes you feel good about yourself. And like you say, it builds that confidence because you know that you're acting in a way that's aligned with your vision and who you want to be, rather than the smaller version of yourself that's simply, you know, created because you're feeling not good in that moment, right?
Mhm.
And so I love this, also this sort of stacking of making the right choices every day, right? Because like
Mhm.
those moments, that the moment that you described, right, and seal fit, that's one of those big moments, right? But the big moments, we can only show up in those big moments when we've created that mental toughness and all of these small choices, like you say, right? Do I throw out my trash, right? Do I like tie my shoes a little bit faster so I can go out and do that workout like 10 seconds faster, right? Like those little choices build the confidence and the skill then to also show up in the large ones. So
Yeah,
absolutely love
man.
that.
Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah. So talk to me about emotions, because this is something that really trips up most people. And I think, I mean, I felt it myself. I think everybody has had this experience, right? You know what you're supposed to do. You know you're not supposed to quit. You know you're supposed to keep studying, keep working out, whatever. But you just don't feel good until you let yourself off the hook, right?
Yep. And this is a tricky thing. And I think, you know, I've had a lot of people literally judge my book by its cover.
Yeah.
You know, we live in this, you know, we live in a world where especially men are getting more in touch with emotions and feelings than ever before. You know, it's okay for men to tell other men that they love each other, or, you know, it's okay for, you know, men to admit that they have mental health or depression. And I say men, it's really everybody. I mean, the whole world is, you know, exploring consciousness and awareness. And you know, my book and the title, if you don't read the book, then the title can make you think that I am against, you know, that sort of exploration. And that
Yeah.
couldn't
Don't
be
have
further
feelings.
from, right. That couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is understanding their role, their function, and not letting them overstep their boundaries. They are a self-regulating system. And, you know, I always ask people, you know, to tell me, give me an example of a self-regulating system that has not overstepped its boundaries, right? If we look at self-regulating systems throughout the history of, you know, humans, we find businesses and entities and organizations that, become corrupt with power, right? And so, that's really what's happening. And in a scientific standpoint, we're talking about dysfunction. And so, let's take a step back and we'll define feelings and emotions. So feelings, as neuroscience defines them, are mental experiences of physiological states. And so, if you're not into like science, nerd like I am, physiological states simply means your body state. So what's going on from my neck or my ears down is my physiological state, and that's going to impact my mental state. So literally, if we can change our physiological state, we can change our mental experience or our feelings. And I think intuitively, everyone, like when we explain that from a scientific standpoint, people are like, huh, what? But intuitively, we all know that we've all seen the meme that says you're only one workout away from a better mood.
Yes.
And that's exactly what they're talking about. Change your physiology, you'll change your mental state. So, if I said, hey, there's 30 seconds on the clock, I'm going to play some, house music with, an upbeat, tempo, and, some major chords that make you sound that are sounds of happiness and positivity. And you do as many burpees as you can, or as many squats as you can in 30 seconds, you're going to be in a different physiological state and in a different mental state after those 30 seconds. And so I always do that in workshops and in keynotes to have people experience what we're talking about. And so once you feel that, then you're like, okay, I get it now. And what we're really talking about when we say fuck your feelings is, there's a cognitive researcher named Antonio Damasio who found out that 95% of our decisions are made based on how we feel in the given moment. So, a lot of times if I'm at an event, I might say, well, Max, why did you choose to wear the shirt that you're wearing right now? And maybe this isn't a good example. Maybe you wear this on every podcast and it's just
every show, yeah. almost.
But there's probably a reason you chose that shirt, right?
Yeah.
You feel confident in it. You feel comfortable in it. You maybe like the way that, it fits the image that you're portraying for, the business or the brand that you're building, right? There are feelings and emotional connotations wrapped up in that decision-making matrix. And there's a ton of micro decisions that lead up to you finally saying, okay, this is the shirt that I'm going to wear today. And so what we don't realize is that happens all the time throughout the day. It happens so much. We simply don't have the bandwidth to go down that rabbit hole and explore in depth every decision that we make all day long. So a lot of these decisions are kind of pre-programmed. Like, we have our cup. Like, I know I needed a cup of water, so I grabbed the cup that I always drink out of. We find little ways to, shortcut that. Most people will take the exact same route to work every single day, even though there are alternative routes, because now you don't have to think about that. You can kind of put that on cruise control or autopilot and think about something else. And, what happens from a standpoint of letting this get in our way, at getting back to your question, like you said, I don't feel like studying, or, I don't feel like writing today. I don't feel like whatever. And I always use the example of a professional athlete, or more specifically an Olympic athlete, because the Olympics only occur every 4 years. And so, let's say we've got somebody training for the Olympics. They don't just wake up in 2020 and say, hey, I'm going to compete in the 2024 Olympics, right? They've probably been training since 2010 or 2014, or at some point younger, to get to the point where they're even good enough to compete at the Olympic trials or whatever. So you're looking at 10 to 20 year career to even become an Olympic athlete in most instances. How many opportunities does that individual have over 10 years to say, I don't feel like getting up at 4 a.m. to go do my workout. I don't feel like doing today's training because it's, I don't want to swim 2 miles in an open ocean. It's cold, it's raining, traffic's bad. I hate being inside in the gym when it's beautiful outside. I don't feel like eating the meals I'm supposed to eat. Nobody has a Hall of Fame career by accident. And whatever our goals are for ourselves and our lives, we're going to have to do things that we don't want to do. We're going to have to do things that we're supposed to do when we don't feel like doing them. And if we spend our days allowing our fleeting and transient feelings to dictate our decisions, it's very difficult for us to go from point A to point Z, 10, 20 years down the road and have a successful career as an athlete or a business person. Pick your business person, whether it's Richard Branson or Oprah or The Rock. There's so many decisions from the time they said, hey, I want to do this, to where we see them now that they had to make regardless of how they felt. And so I think that answers your question, and I hope it does.
Yes, totally. And I love what you're saying here, and really clarifying that, like, fuck your feelings is not about like not having emotions, right? It's not about avoiding emotions. It's about being incredibly self-aware of how you're feeling, but simply not letting that affect how you actually act in the world and how you operate in those moments when you don't feel good, right? It's about deciding that, hey, I may not feel good, right? I may be in total pain like you were, right, at SealFit, but I'm still deciding to keep going.
Yeah, and awareness is the key word there. And I'm glad you said that, because that's the rest of the conversation here. It's awareness creates choice. And that's what we're trying to develop here, is bringing in awareness to these instances and say, okay, you know what? I am acknowledging and accepting that I don't feel like doing this right now. And, I have in this moment a choice. This awareness of this fact is presenting me an opportunity. Do I continue to go down the path of doing what I feel like, or am I going to choose to act according to my goals and values? And when I sell the books on my website, and when you buy it off my website, I sign the book. So whether it's off the website or at a book signing, I sign every book, and I say, may your actions always align with your values. And I want everybody to be able to have those moments of awareness, and to make sure that we're choosing to act according to our values as opposed to our feelings. Because our feelings they'll fuck us up. They'll lead us astray. There's no 100%. Doubt about that.
Yeah, because that's a challenge, right? Because most people are so out of touch when their feelings, right? That when that moment occurs, they'd rather hide from it, right? They'd rather distract themselves with movies, with junk food, with whatever it is that they need to do to feel good again for a moment, right? But as both of us know, right, that's not a very effective strategy to actually change the way you feel.
It's funny you brought that up. We actually, so a really good friend of mine and I have a talk that we do, and it's called Answering the Call. And it's about how high performers think. And in that talk, we refer to those examples that you mentioned as anesthetics. Yes. Whether it's drugs or porn or food, all the addictions that we have, we use those as distractions so that we don't have to face those underlying things that, are there are monsters, our demons, whatever you want to call them. We all have them. And, as long as we hide from them or run from them, they have power over us. So it's up to us to face them head on. And that's the difficult work that faces all of us. But it's what we have to do in order to step fully into who we are, who we can become, and who we ultimately want to become, in order to be that version of us.
Yes, and you mentioned before the importance of values and living from those. But before we dive into this, I want to go a little deeper into what you just said, because this practice of deliberately seeking out and embracing and learning to deal with those fears and those anxieties and those frustrations and all of that stuff is so important. So what can people do? If they're in this moment right now, they're like, I have all these emotions, right? And if you're listening to this, really reflect a little bit on your life. Like, what does your emotional state look like on a daily basis? And if you have those emotions, right, and you're trying to run from them, you're using those anesthetics, right, then how can people, learn to deal with them proactively?
Yeah, I think the first step is awareness, right? Just like we talked about a minute ago, is to bring in awareness to this thing. And I think many people are totally unaware that they have these patterns. So it starts with, auditing your actions and your decisions, taking that objective view. And, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we need a coach or a mentor or a really good friend to point those out and, call us on our shit and say, like, Max, like, every time stuff gets hard, you do blank. Yeah. Tony Robbins talks about this as your emotional home. And the first time I heard him talk about this, like that one really struck a chord with me because I think we all have an emotional home. We all go to a certain emotional state. We all know that person that's always angry, right? The littlest thing will trigger them, and they get angry about this, they get angry about that. It's never the thing, right? It's not the guy who cut you off in traffic. It's not the fact that your coffee wasn't hot enough or that it was too cold. You went to anger because that's where you always go. That's your emotional home. So step one is realizing that, being aware of it. And then step two is digging into why. And, that is often a very long journey and pursuit. These things are not, you're not going to meditate on this one day and be like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, now
I'm
it's solved. Yeah.
I mean, this is a life. This is our life's work is to constantly, explore these edges and look for our shadows and, find these blind spots. This is another thing we talk about in the workshop, is that many times our largest opportunities for growth lie in our blind spots. And by definition, if something is in our blind spot, we don't even know that it's there. So again, we need to read, we need to learn, we need to have people around us point these things out. And, to answer your question, Max, I think it's a series of questions, and, it depends on what the thing is. If we're talking about our emotional state or our emotional home, what has happened in our past that, usually something in the past occurred, and in that moment, going to that emotional home, or in that instance, that first time, it was just an emotional place, it served us. But we got comfortable going there and we started operating out of that. And now it's no longer serving us. So remember, all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, we're talking about function and dysfunction. And so if we're always going to this emotional home, is that a dysfunctional emotional EQ or intelligence, or, however you want to phrase that? And in most instances, the answer is yes. And so it's if that's the thing that we're going to talk about, then the questions are, what happened? Why did that serve me? Does that continue to serve me? And I think that's a really good general question, is, does this serve me? Does this serve me well? Where did this pattern develop? And it's, it's understanding that at a certain time, everything that is a habit probably served us well, either once or a few times early on, but maybe it doesn't continue to. So, does this continue to serve me? If it doesn't, how can I modify this or adapt it to serve me? I think we're all guilty of what I call binary thinking, good or bad. And you probably get questions like this all the time. But whether it's fitness, is this exercise good or bad? Isn't healthy? Those are very binary questions, right? It's yes or no, black or white, good or bad. And the advice I give everybody is just be less binary. If we're talking about squats, then, it's a great exercise. Is it great for you? Does it fit your goals and your context right now? I don't know. Same thing with certain foods. There's certain people that maybe shouldn't be eating, I don't know, sweet potatoes. But does that mean that it's across the board blanket statement of bad food? No. So I think when it comes to ourselves and our growth, our mindset, our exploration of our psychology and physiology, to, not be judgmental, to ask that developmental or integrative type question. How does this serve me? Can this serve me? Can this be useful? How can this be useful? Instead of can this be useful?
Yeah, I think those questions are really, really powerful. And you sort of alluded to something before, which is really this idea that oftentimes the habits in our lives, like the negative habits, right? All the stuff we want to get rid of isn't necessarily or at least wasn't necessarily bad, because it served a certain purpose at some point, right? So for me, for example, when I was in high school a couple of years back, I would just eat tons and tons of sugar, gummy bears, chocolate, all that stuff, because it was my way of coping with, stress and anxiety and all that stuff, right? And so it evolved as the thing that really allowed me to, get in a better emotional state. The problem was at some point it stopped serving me, right? Because I realized this is
Right.
only worse. But I think this is one of the keys to really changing those things, because people always want to just get rid of the habit without analyzing like what's the actual cause, right? Because the habit
Yeah.
is oftentimes just a symptom of what you're experiencing, but the cause is actually the underlying emotional need that you're trying to satisfy, which is, I want to feel better, I want to be less stressed, I want to be a little bit happier, more joyful, whatever it is. And so I think, like you say, like letting go of this binary thinking of just yes, no, and really diving deeper into like, why am I doing this, right? And does this really serve me, is so important.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And, I think just one thing to piggyback on that is, in those instances, most of the time our habits are our brain's best guess or best answer to how we make ourselves feel better in that moment, right? It's our brain's best solution. And so your example of you in high school, you didn't have the emotional intelligence that you have now. You didn't understand that there were better options for you. Now that you have that education and that knowledge, you understand that there are things that serve you better, both short term and long term. And you've said, okay, well, when I feel that craving or that desire to eat these foods, I can understand why. I know what the underlying need is. Now, how can I meet those needs in a way that serves me better? And you're understanding the trigger, and you're replacing the action that you want to change with a better action. And that's, I think, a part of transformation that isn't well taught, or discussed often in any pursuit. I mean, this is, whether it's nutrition or fitness. I mean, those are underlying principles in why most people want to lose weight or eat better, or the personal development work that we love. So yeah,
Yes, for sure.
really good points there.
No, I absolutely love that. Now let's go back for a moment to values. You talked a lot about, living from your values rather than the emotions that you're currently feeling. So for people, I mean, I guess it starts with awareness again, right? What are your values, right? What do you actually, how do you want to live? How do you want to show up on your daily basis? So do you have any advice for people on really how to get clear on that? And then, once they have a list of values, maybe some things that they want to live for, live with, how they can actually bring that into daily life?
Yeah. So, so here's what I'll do. I've actually got this. I have a video series on this on my website. It's totally free. And what we'll do is I can send you the link to it. You can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely love that.
I'll walk people through it right now, but if people want to go through it more, and we do this, I think I mentioned it in the book. I know we do this at all the workshops that I do, all the Better Human workshops. And so the webpage is ryanmunsey.com/define-your-values. And like I said, I'll send you the link, Max, and you can share
Great.
it. But what we do is it's basically getting people to write down their values. And so, I get to work with individuals and a lot of organizations or companies. And I find that what we're about to do is the most powerful and profound in people who are maybe 30 and older and in a professional setting. If you're a part of an organization or a team or a business that is focused on core values and mission statements and development and branding and culture, even teams, so athletes, this is really powerful. But most of these individuals can tell you the core values of their company, but they've never defined their core values as an individual.
Yeah.
And when we do this, people are just like, wow, holy shit. Like, I can't believe I've never thought about that. And so, that's why I say in those instances, it's a little bit more powerful. It doesn't mean that if you're not there, it doesn't work. But so really and a lot of my cues are very much like the questions you asked. Who are you? What do you stand for? What do you stand against? And I know that's sort of a counterintuitive question, but a lot of times it's easy for us to identify the things that we don't like, and then go to the opposite side of that. So you and I might both agree that we hate when individuals are rude to another individual that they can be rude to, like a barista or a waiter.
Yes, 100%.
Right? And so then what we really value is kindness.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get stuck on what are your values, what do you stand for? Think about, what do you stand against? What drives you crazy? And then what's on the opposite end of the spectrum from that? Thinking about your legacy. How do you want to be remembered? When other people talk about you, what words do you want them to use when they describe you or talk about you? And those are just some of the cues that I give when I'm asking people to write down as many words as you can come up with, as many values as you can come up with for yourself: kindness, love, compassion, leader, whatever they are. And so usually I'll have people write down anywhere from 5 to 10. And then I will say, pick the 3 that resonate with you or that jump off the page and scream at you the most. And then I'm looking for my phone, and I realize I'm talking to you on it, so I can't hold up my phone and show you. But what we do at the workshops to cement this for folks is, because the second part of your question is, how do we bring this into our daily life? I have an alert on my phone that goes off at the same time every single day. And it says, am I being that person? And then right after the question mark, it has those 3 words in all capital letters. And so, I tell people, do this. You don't have to do it, but if you get that daily reminder, it's just subconsciously wiring it in there. Every single day you're being asked, and you're not even being told, hey, be that person. It's just you asking yourself. It's kind of like Coach McLeod at SealFit asking me, he's like, what do you want to do? That was totally my choice. He gave me the choice. And so you're giving yourself that choice every single day. Do I want to show up as this version of me? And I think that's a really powerful way to just remind yourself every single day, like, hey, this is who you said you want to show up as. Are you actually doing it?
Ryan, I'm so glad that you mentioned this point about the smartphone reminder, because that's literally what I used to really shift the way I was feeling on a daily basis. So I had for a very long time, actually, every hour, right, between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m., I would have an alarm that go off: present, excited, powerful. So that was the emotional state that I wanted to create, right? And then, because once you have the awareness, like you say, right, once you know this is how I'm supposed to feel, like up here, and you realize like, oh shoot, I'm like somewhere down here. Now you have a choice to do things that get you up there. But I think, like you say, this awareness of how am I feeling and where do I want to go and how do I want to show up is so important.
So I've got a question for you, Max. When you, let's say it's 11 o'clock and, that alert goes off and you are down here. Sometimes we can say, oh, I realize I'm here. I can just bring it up to here and it's pretty easy. But on those days where you're struggling, on those times where it's really difficult, what are some of your go-tos to get from here to here?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I've realized is oftentimes it's easier to change the mind through the body. And this is something you touched upon before, right? It's like things like exercise, things like cold showers, things like simply jumping up and down, pulling a little smile on the face. The interesting thing is, like, you don't even need to change the way that you think. You change the way that you show up physically, right? You put your chest out a little bit, and all of a sudden, like, you feel better, right? Exercise is something that, like, you can finish a run and like not feel good afterwards. Like, I think it's literally impossible, unless of course you hate running, but for me, it's like the greatest thing. But those are really my go-tos. And then the last one I would say is really focusing again on that vision, right? Because it's so easy to get distracted by, oh my gosh, all these emails and all this, stuff to do that I want to do. But when you have that vision and you get this physical excitement again, that is powerful.
That's awesome. I love it.
Do you have anything to add to that? I know you're also big into ice cold showers and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I think everything you mentioned is great. I think the 2 that I would recommend that may be easier for a majority of people, and I only say easier because sometimes maybe you're in your car driving, or maybe you're on an airplane, or you're at work and you can't necessarily access a cold shower or a run. Breath work, because we're always breathing, so you can do breath work anywhere. Focusing on a longer exhale than an inhale, breathing through your nose. The longer exhale, the exhale is the parasympathetic portion of the breathing. So if we make that longer, then we make it a parasympathetic activity, which increases bandwidth or heart rate variability, which is kind of, our ability to deal with stuff. So we can kind of down regulate by focusing on the exhale. And, I think music is a very powerful thing
Yes.
to shift our minds and our states as well. So, a lot of times if you're, on a commuter train, or if you're on the subway or on a plane or whatever, you can kind of go to your music and let that help you as well. So everything you said, and then maybe add those as well to your toolbox of things that you can go to.
Yeah, music I found is really surprisingly super effective. So,
Mhm.
in my younger, teens, I was playing football. So, European football, meaning soccer a lot. And what we do before every single game, our coach had Conquest of Paradise playing, right? So it's this epic hymn, right? It just makes you so energetic and alive, right? And we'd
Right.
run out there like ready to just crush the opponent. But that is really the power of music, right? It can uplift you and elevate you in such an interesting way without you even having to do anything.
Right. Well, just imagine walking into a nightclub at 1 o'clock in the morning, and, instead of hearing like house music with lasers going around and tons of bass, in that tempo. I'm not going to try to make the noise because I'll be
Yeah.
terrible at it, but everybody knows what I'm saying. Imagine if you walked in there and it was like a string quartet playing, Beethoven from,
Yeah.
3 centuries ago at an incredibly slow pace, and you wouldn't have the environment. And so, like, or walk into a casino and listen to the music. Like, people who get paid, big bucks, when the environment is right, understand how to create the environment through music. And so that's just something, as you go through the next couple of months, pay attention when you're in certain places, and listen to, the music that is being played, because it's rarely an accident. Most people understand the importance and the power of that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Ryan, I want to dive a little bit deeper into your own story, because what I found is that every single guest on this show that really became world class at something, at some point struggled with it. At some point, had a failure. At some point, was really not that good, and they had sort of the drive that came from not being good enough yet, that they wanted to master that. So in your own life, did you ever have a time in your life where you just weren't mentally like super strong like you are now?
Yeah. So, it's funny you say that, because I tell people this all the time, that, I think the way it was phrased to me initially is that, every strength comes from what was once a deficit.
Yeah.
So if you see somebody who is a great copywriter, maybe at one time they didn't understand, sociology, psychology, writing, whatever. If you see somebody who is, a great coach, maybe at one time they struggled with connecting with people and communicating. So, yeah, I think, gosh, probably all of it. I mean, there was a time where I was not an effective communicator. There was a time where, I hated writing. I majored in science
Wow.
stuff. I always had an aptitude for math and science, and when I got to college, I was like, oh, I'm gonna major in a science so I don't have to write. Now I write for a living.
Yeah.
Um, and they also tricked me. Don't major in a science, because not only do you have to write lab reports, but you have to go to the labs that are like 4 hours a week. So you end up going to more class and doing the writing. So I should
It's
have
just
just
a bad
majored in
choice.
writing.
I did the
um,
same thing. I started studying psychology thinking I'd never have to take math classes again. And it was all damn stats. So
yeah, they always get you.
yeah, life
But
advice right here.
yeah, and so I think, I think like a lot of people, I've struggled with, being able to focus, on a day-to-day basis, but also kind of focus, my passions. And, it took me, I was probably 26 when I kind of, quote unquote, got it. And so now, just a couple of weeks ago, I sat down and I had coffee with some guys who were 20, and, they've
Yeah.
already written a book together, and they're doing a couple of different things. And they're like, what should we do? And I was like, dude, you guys are like, you're where I was when I was 30. Like, it's so
Yeah.
cool to see that. Like, so yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things like time management. I was not very good at that. All the things that you might see me have as a strength are things that I've either developed or kind of cultivated, curated, learned over time. Struggling with the highs and lows, like kind of depression and, like always wanting to be here, but realizing that's not realistic, and like accepting, the days that I'm here. And yeah, I mean, I think all of it. And I think on the value side of it too, I mean, there were a few opportunities presented to me when I was younger where, I kind of had an opportunity to have some really quick success, but I would have had to do things that I would not have been proud of, and that would have been outside of, who I am. And very thankfully, I was able to say no, and pass on those things, because the only way I could articulate it at that time was that I wanted to be able to, sleep when I put my head on my pillow at night, knowing that I did it the right way. And what I realize now is that it was just, those things weren't aligned with my values, and I knew that that wasn't the right choice for me. And so I think just understanding that it's a journey and a process, and, don't expect to be great at the things that you want to start off with now, and, just fall in love with the process, and be consistent, and keep developing those.
Yeah, there's this common thread that I'm really trying to pull through this entire show, through every single interview, which is that none of my guests were born great. None of my guests were born these amazing human beings, right? That are simply like just conquering the world, but all of them developed themselves. I had Dr. Anders Ericsson on the show, whom I'm sure you've heard about and know, right? And his work on really how do you become the best in the world. And what he's found is like, it just takes an inhuman amount of work. And the people that come on the show, people like you, they have done that work, right? Because they have that self-awareness. They really ask themselves those difficult questions of, how am I not measuring up yet? Who do I want to be? How can I get closer to that? And then they deliberately work on that. And so that's why I love that story.
Yeah, it's identifying the gaps, and then stopping at nothing to show up and close those gaps. And to me, that was always the fascination. And I guess to help you tie that thread between all the shows, I didn't realize that's exactly what you were looking for. So I grew up playing sports. I played soccer and basketball up until I got to college. I wasn't good enough to play in college. But, when I graduated high school, despite the fact that I played sports all the time, I was skinny fat. I was, I'm the only male in my family who isn't diabetic. Had I not played sports all the time, I probably would be, or would have been, diabetic. So, I was slow. I was a bad athlete. I'm probably a better athlete at 35 than I was at 18. I know I was a better athlete at 30 than I was at 18. So I was slow. I was, skinny fat. I wasn't healthy, and, I was lazy and entitled. And, now it's like, I'd like to be able to say totally the opposite. But yeah, I mean, to your point, and to the point of many of your previous guests, it's, seeing where you want to be, identifying those gaps, being consistent in taking the actions that are required to close those gaps. And that's a lot of hard work. And, to me, I was always obsessed with, what is it that high performers or successful people do or have? And that's really, that seeking the answer to that question is what led to writing the book, Fuck Your Feelings. And so, that's my answer to what we have to do in the day-to-day to close those gaps.
Yes, absolutely love that. Now, as I said in the beginning of the show, I'm a huge fan of the Better Human podcast. So what are the biggest lessons that you've learned, over now a while? I think what's been 2 years now of the show almost?
So BHP launched in the beginning of 2018. Yeah. And so prior to that, it was prior to that, I did the Optimal Performance podcast for 2.5, almost 3 years. I'd say in close to 500 podcasts. I've gotten to speak with some amazing people. And I think you and I were talking about it before we hit record. I mean, one of the coolest things about podcasting in general is just being able to connect with people and grow your personal and your professional network. And I think that kind of ties into one of the other lessons, is that, there's something that we can learn from everybody. And, everybody has a story. Everybody has their own unique experiences that can provide insight or help or comfort or guidance for all of us, if we're willing to ask the right questions and listen. And maybe that's the next thing, is learning how to ask better questions and learning how to be a better listener and a better communicator. Yeah, I'd go with something along those lines, as opposed to trying to just, maybe find one or two nuggets from
Yeah.
a guest, because I mean, I could probably pull 2 or 3 pieces of gold from every single episode.
Yeah, the fascinating thing to me is that, like, oftentimes people will deliver the same message in different wording, right? And so it doesn't necessarily hit you with this person, but then the other person says it in a slightly different way, and all of a sudden it hits you, right? Or because you've had that experience before of being exposed to an idea, and now you suddenly start to really internalize it. I think that's really powerful, right? Just getting this message, or these messages constantly, every single day, these lessons, these insights over and over again, until they get really ingrained in your brain.
Yep. Got to wire that stuff in there.
Totally. Now, Ryan, I'm a huge fan of this Latin phrase, Memento Mori, remember your death, right? And so I always, have this tombstone moment in the show, like the day that you're going to die. We talked about values a lot, about purpose. What do you want written on your tombstone?
I've got a really good friend that posts that Latin phrase a lot. His name is Scott McGee, and he's got a podcast called The Sisu Way. And I started thinking about that exact question a lot when I started my gym back in 2012. I read Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect.
Love it, yeah.
And he poses a question, of like, who would come to your funeral and what would they say? And if it rained on that day, who would go from the ceremony to the gravesite? And that was the one that really got me.
Who's not just there for the food, but
yeah, who's going to come and stand in the rain and watch that casket get lowered into the ground? And I know that's kind of like gloomy, and but that's something I think about a lot. And at that time, I had recently left modeling, and for a time, my main focus had been on kind of my external appearance and my numbers in the gym. And I just remember thinking, like, damn, when my body is rotting in the ground, it's not going to matter how much I squatted or what my body fat percentage was. And if that's the best that I can give somebody to write on my tombstone, then I have failed miserably. And so really, like I said, that was 2012. And that was a really powerful shift for me, as I started my business, to stop thinking about those things and to start thinking about legacy and how I could show up for people and how I could help people. And I guess, I think maybe the highest praise that, that somebody could say about me when I'm gone is that, I made other people's lives better. I can't think of a better purpose while I'm here. So, I think everything I do, whether it's nutrition or mindset or writing or podcasting, is, along those lines of trying to help other people live more fully, as the person that they want to live. And so, yeah, it would have to be something along those lines.
Yeah, I love that. Now, what other thing we're always doing the shows, we love to celebrate failure as a stepping stone to building more character, more grit. So do you have throughout your life a favorite failure?
A favorite one?
Favorite one, yeah. Better be a good one.
That's a good question. I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite failure, but I love it when people tell me I can't do something. I love it when I have an idea and people are like, oh, there's no way you can do that, or you shouldn't do that. With the book, Fuck Your Feelings, maybe you could call it a failure that, book agent basically told me, like, hey, we can get you a book deal, but it's going to be like $20,000. And what you really need to do is go on a PR tour for the next 2 years and build a huge following, and then come back and we can get a book deal. And I just said, well, the hell with that. If I'm going to go on a 2-year PR tour, I'm going to write the book, and at least have a reason to go on a PR tour and talk about the
Yeah.
book. So, I mean, I don't really consider it a failure, but I think maybe some people, that might be like an obstacle that shuts down their pursuit of a dream, right? If you think you want to publish a book and an agent or a publisher says like no, and it's not going to happen, then I was like, well, all right, I'm just going to self-publish it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe that's failure, maybe it's not. But I think just looking for places, ways that I've been slighted or doubted or whatever, and kind of using that as motivation. But also looking into it, like, why did they slight me? Why did they doubt me? What did I not show them that they needed to see? Are they right in saying that? And if I'm going to prove them wrong, then if that gap actually existed, it's going to require me to close that gap. So it's not just, the basic chip on your shoulder, prove somebody wrong, but, looking at it as a way to actually get better.
I love this question of how are my haters right? So like in
Yeah.
what way are they saying things that, they feel uncomfortable and I may hate it, but are they right? Because what I've realized oftentimes is like when people doubt you, there's some kind of reason behind it, right? There's certain, underlying mechanisms, underlying belief structures, underlying maybe even skill sets that are missing that you haven't yet developed, right? Doesn't mean you can't ever develop them, but it means right now you're not yet the person that you need to be in order to be able to execute on those goals.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah, I love that. Now, if you could give our listeners one piece of homework to take away from this episode today, what would be the one thing they should start doing to become better human beings?
Ooh, I like that. Let's go with the values exercise.
Yeah.
If you haven't defined your values as an individual, I would encourage you to do that today, tonight. Like, find out, write it down. Who are you? What do you stand for? How do you want to be remembered? And then start acting accordingly. Because once you write those things down, then the next question I would ask you is, what is stopping you from acting that way right now? And I always get one of two answers. People either say nothing or me, right? Either way, you're in control of whether or not you act that way or move through the world that way from now on. And you don't need a coach or a guru or a book or a seminar to do that. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, I love that. It's an internal work, right? Of really turning inside, taking a responsibility and self-awareness for how you want to live. Now, before I ask my final question, where can listeners connect with you online?
Yeah, so my website is sort of the hub for everything, ryanmunsey.com. Instagram is probably my social media platform of choice, and that one is at Ryan Munsey with an underscore at the end. Podcast, as you mentioned, is the Better Human Project, and that's available anywhere you listen to podcasts. I think that's it.
Perfect. Now, my final question is, what is your quest for greatness? What's that big vision that you want to bring into this world?
Oh, man. When I had the gym, our tagline was stronger, healthier, happier. And, I wanted every person that I encountered to live a stronger, healthier, happier life for, having crossed paths with me. And I still think that's pretty close to, what my main purpose is. I don't have a brick and mortar facility anymore. Now it's through writing and podcasting and speaking. But that's like, I just think that, I think we can all live, and maybe it's evolving more now into, love, kindness, doing better for others. But I think if we can all kind of step into that and do the work, to be better ourselves, then we can show up and do better for others. And so that's where kind of the evolution of that tagline for the new Better Human Project, be better, do better, has kind of come in. And I think if we can do that, then we can make the world a stronger, healthier, happier place. Because I think we both know, and I'm sure most of your listeners know, that the world is there's a lot of darkness, a lot of fear, and a lot of unhealthiness out there. And I think, it's up to us to, it starts with ourselves, and then, how we show up and deliver, to the rest of the world to make it a better place.